Okay, everybody, now we're on to part two of part two on our boot camp analysis. We're going to be looking at paper menagerie for the third time. The first was just, let's just read it. Second was looking at plot and structure. And then you should have already done the ed puzzle on characterization, which is the first part and the main part. And now here's the second part of the part two for looking at the story for the third time on point of view. Now, point of view is not going to give you the most bang for your buck for most stories. It's important to think about and consider, and there are advantages and disadvantages and motivations and meaning with what kind of point of view the author chooses to write in. Absolutely. However, with short stories, as opposed to novels, we don't really want to focus too much on point of view. So when you're doing your ARNs for the short stories, I would like you to, at least definitely for this one, only focus on like one ARN on point of view at most, more on characterization. But we still need to go over this, and it's important because when we get into some other stories, the point of view is going to be really rich and have a lot to do with the whole effect and meaning and theme of the story, especially when you get into the fall, the book called The Fall, which we'll be reading in the fall. Okay, so let's get started. So, point of view. I know y'all know this. I bet you do. So, in the text box, I would like you to list all the points of view that authors can write stories in that you can remember. And just think about why authors might use each of the different kinds. I only ask you to type in the 4 kinds or the 5 kinds or 3 kinds or however many you can remember. And then we'll get to, we'll talk about the why throughout the lecture, but see if you can remember at least the names of it. Okay, so hopefully you guys all know already that point of view, analyzing that is beyond just it's beyond once upon a time. There are other things you need to ask yourself when trying to decipher and identify not only what kind of point of view it is, but maybe the effects and the purpose and all that other stuff when analyzing points of view. So one question you want to ask yourself to figure out at least identifying it and then later analyzing it is, who's telling the story? You also want to be looking at how much is this person allowed to know. That also helps us. And also, to what extent does the narrator look inside the characters' minds or report their thoughts and feelings? Okay. So, depending on the answer, is going to help you find those kinds, right? So, there's lots of variations and combinations, but there's kind of 4 basic points of view that are used the most. There's omniscient, which is a third person point of view. Omniscient, remember, omni means all, and shint, okay, has to do with knowledge, right? That knows everything, all right? Because science means knowledge in Latin. Omni means all. There's also third person limited. So third person limited, they don't know everything, right? You might only be following a character, but the narrator is not a character, right? Because third person means you are not the character. There's someone kind of from above looking down, describing the story, right? So they're usually a non-character. If it's third person, right, it's a non-character thing. So omniscient, a non-character describing everything, usually not personified in any way. Third person limited means that it's still a non-character narrator, but they are only able to maybe follow 1 or 2 characters, and they are limited. And so it could be following a major character or a minor character, right? So like some books, it might even shift within stories. Like it might follow just 1 character for a while, but we only know what that character knows. And then we might follow another character and we only know what that character knows. And it helps add to suspense and mystery and kind of putting you in the character's shoes without being like first person, literally kind of in their shoes. Okay. In fact, like the books Game of Thrones, and it's kind of a new trend actually. A lot of books do this where it follows 1 character at a time. The chapters keep fluctuating between the different characters, like Children of Blood and Bone does that, if you've read that. And then there's first person, which is a story being told by a character, right, in the I. Okay. And it could be a major character, the protagonist, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Sometimes it could be a more minor character, or at least not the protagonist, like Great Gatsby, the narrator. It's first person, it's a character, and he is not Gatsby. He is not the protagonist, okay? Um, and then another example of that would be One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That's a book where the protagonist, McMurphy, is the main character, and the narrator is uh, a Native American gentleman who is refusing to talk, but he's wanting to tell a story now. But in the story, he's just kind of a watcher. So he's in the periphery, he's trying to be invisible for reasons. He's got trauma. So he's just kind of watching things and he's telling us after everything's happened, right? So, but he's not the protagonist, even though he is the storyteller. So, but most of the first person, it's usually the protagonist is the narrator. And then there's the weird one, second person, okay, where there's you. You're going to do this and you're going to do that. It's it's almost like making you the character. There's in a story where there's this you language, as opposed to first person would be I, would be the main word. Second person is you. Third person is them, they, as the kind of main kind of pronoun way to kind of remember the point of view of who's telling it. Okay. So omniscient point of view, right? It's third person, unlimited knowledge and presence, can interpret and comment as much or as little as they want. Some give tons of like kind of commentary, right? Like in Scarlet Letter, although that's kind of a character in a way. It is. So, it's some, but they're still like a narrator most of the time, and then they kind of pop in. And then, and then in others, right? They kind of just are just telling you the story, and they don't put a lot of judgment or interpretation. It's left to you. It's the most flexible point of view. So if you want to really be able to understand people and be able to get into multiple people's hearts and minds, it's a good choice. But it's the most subject to abuse. It's something that can be actually how can I put this? It is something that can be used to make things kind of I don't know, not believable, can cause plot holes, and yeah. So used skillfully, though, it enables an author to achieve a simultaneous breadth and depth, right? If you do it right. So it can go awry, right? If you want to have mystery, it can be hard and you can mess up, right? So it's a sticky one. It's the most common. First and third omniscient are the most common. Okay. All right. Anyway, but there is a constant danger. The narrator might get in the way. So I guess that's kind of the point I want to make about the abuse comment. If the narrator is making too much judgment and telling you too much, it can keep you from making your own decisions and your own judgments, and it's kind of like it's almost like the well is being poisoned by the narrator's point of view, and it's not letting you kind of figure stuff out on your own, because a good story is more about showing than telling. So it can be a problem. And continual shifting of character viewpoint can cause a breakdown in the coherence or the unity that we talked about before. It can make it confusing and hard to follow. It can make it hard for you to connect emotionally with characters. If it's unskillfully used, it can destroy that illusion of reality that all stories hopefully attempt to create, right? That suspension of disbelief. So, that can be a problem. We'll see, in the stories that we read if that happens. The next one we're talking about is third person limited. Okay, third person limited is from the point of view of one character at a time, at least, but isn't a character, right? So it's kind of like this GIF I added here. And yes, I say GIF, not GIF, because it's graphic, not graphic. But anyhow, like this kind of shadow figure that's following this kid, right? And maybe they get to know what's in his mind, and they're just kind of following him, right? But they aren't a character that's seen or involved, okay? They're like subjective truth filters, right? And With this, you're able to maybe move both inside and outside of the characters, but sometimes they'll just talk about action, maybe, and sometimes they'll get inside their minds, but they don't leave their sides. It's kind of just with third person omniscient, you can kind of float all over, but with third person limited, they're just kind of, you're limited to one character, usually. I mean, it might flip a little bit, but at least within that chapter, it's just following that one person. And it may tell us what these characters see, hear, think, and feel. So we might get a little bit more of an intimate connection with that character, even though it's in third person. Although the problem with that is that it may interpret their character's thoughts and behavior, and that could get in the way. It knows everything about that character's point of view, but is limited from other people's point of view. So that does help with keeping mystery, suspense, and kind of falling in line with kind of how we navigate the world, right? So it can be a good thing. All right. So as I said, there's no direct knowledge about the other character's point of view. You're just kind of, it just is like omniscient for that one character. So I hope that makes sense. It may follow major or minor characters, a participant or an observer. But the choice, can be really vital to the story. Usually, readers are connected more with omniscient. Usually, the reader is more connected than in this one. Than on the omniscient point of view, as I'd said. Because as I said, it's more like how we experience the world. It forces us to make more inferences, like we do in real life. Okay, it's like we're being led to see a limited field of observation. Okay. So show me your understanding in the text box. What's the difference between the omniscient third person and the limited third person narration? All right, now we're going on to first person point of view. And this is like when the author disappears into the characters telling the story, right? It's a major or minor character, a protagonist or an observer. And you gain an immediacy, to that character, and it feels real. Especially because it's told directly from a participant. And it's like they're having this personal conversation relationship with the reader. So a lot of people prefer this in certain kinds of stories to use and to consume, because it does really feel like you're making a friend, or you just get really emotionally connected, It helps offer opportunities for dramatic irony, though. If you don't recall, dramatic irony is when you might know something the character doesn't know, even though they're talking to you. You might be able to figure stuff out that the character's unaware of or doesn't want to admit. And it really helps us kind of with the understanding another person's point of view through their limited scope. So it's like stepping into their shoes and seeing the world through their eyes, while also in your own eyes. So you're able to maybe see things that you don't have access to to others that you would in normal life, right? But it helps us kind of, what am I trying to say? It helps us with understanding how, when we are limited in our own points of view, the kind of mistakes we make and the misinterpretations and the foolishness, and just the whole human experience from that person's perspective, and being able to understand why people do the things they do, and then in turn understand why we do what we do. It gives us a kind of vantage point, right? And as I already said, right, it's intimate. It's got more emotional power than the third persons do. But it is limited, because you're getting some. You're going to have an issue, because you're going to worry, whether it's first person point of view, you need to worry and be skeptical always of it having an unreliable narrator, right? And you're going to get some direct interpretation from that character that might get in the way of you being able to be as an outside observer and make an interpretation from the outside when you're reading in third person. So that subjective point of view can both alter how you see the story and the interpretation of the story. But it also, you got to remember, people are, even when people are trying to be honest, we are very good at lying to ourselves And so characters might be hiding things from you. And so that can create the kind of, tension and ambiguity and anxiety of a story, and the mystery, right? So you got to be always wary about unreliable narrators when it's coming from one person's point of view, because we don't have access to capital T truth, right? We all have pieces, right? What is it? What is that expression? There's three sides to every story. There's my story, your story, and the truth, right? So you're not going to be getting that truth you might be getting from third person omniscient. You're going to be getting just their story, okay, which is only a partial truth, no matter the character being honest or not, because we just don't have access to everything and we misunderstand stuff through our personal lens. So that can harm unity and coherence. Okay, it can lead to plot holes. So it does have pitfalls. So checking your understanding. What is a virtue of first person point of view? What's a positive effect that can result from an author choosing first person point of view? And what's a limitation? What is a downfall that could happen because of an author choosing first person point of view? What are some limitations or some consequences that we need to be aware of? Okay. Now that you've answered those two questions in the text box, let's talk about the last of the four, second person point of view. So it's rare, but it's really neat if the author can pull it off. When we read the book called The Fall by Albert Camus, it's in second person. It's very neat. There are only two characters. Well, there's three, and we bring up. There's a bunch of characters are brought up, but really the only ones that really matter are the narrator and us. So it is first person, yes, and that it's telling us the main character, the character named Jean Baptiste Clémence, is telling us his story, but he's also constantly talking to us, and it's not breaking the fourth wall exactly. It is, you are a character in this story, so it's pretty cool when he's addressing you. So it's got a mix of second person. So, right, so third person is they, them. First person's I, me. Second person is you. So here's an example. You were about to begin reading Italo Calvino's new novel. If on a winter's night of a traveler, relax, concentrate, dispel every other thought, let the world around you fade. So it's saying you need to do this, you need to do that. It's like talking right at you, right? It's that kind of breaking the fourth wall stuff. So as you read, you want to make sure to ID the type and ask, is the narrator reliable? How's the narrator's mind and personality affect the interpretation? Because what if they're, the narrator from One for the Cuckoo's Nest, you can't trust him fully. He even says, everything I say is true, even if it didn't happen. He admits he's a paranoid schizophrenic. So is what he's saying literally true? No, right? And you got to be careful about like how much really happened and how much is his kind of interpretation and how much is it like hallucination because of his condition. All right, but personality can also get in the way, right? Are they a truthful character or not? Are they messing with you, right? Like if you ever get to read Othello with Shakespeare, the protagonist Iago, who's the villain, when we were talking about that with characters, right? About good guy, bad guy stuff. The protagonist is actually definitely deliciously evilly bad. He is not trustworthy even when he's telling you what he's doing. He doesn't really tell you why, and we're seeing things through his lens, and so he's kind of leading us to see things on his terms, but when we get to kind of move away from his interpretation of things, we can see, oh my gosh, what's going on here? So the character can also be a devious narrator. So that's that. Is the narrator perceptive or not? Are they oblivious, or are they really good at assessing the situation? You need to think whether or not the interpretation can be accepted at face value or discounted because of ignorance or character being, I hate to use the word stupid, but they could be completely clueless, right? Maybe that's a better word. Or because of self-deception. We're all very good at that. And you need to ask, is the narrator consistent or shifting, right? So that's the reliable stuff. And then you also want to be looking at what effect or purpose did this choice have? How does the point of view choice contribute to the meaning or the effect of the work? Because remember, that's the main view book. So first you want to figure out like, what kind is it? Is the narrator reliable? because that's going to give you warnings. And then, and about should I be taking things ironically? Should I be taking things at face value, right? But also, well, what's the meaning that I can find with that choice? Okay. Or what's the effect of the piece of work because of that choice? That's where we want to get our analysis, the why part of our ARNs. But how do you determine the point of view of, but how do you determine the point of view in a story? What should you look out for so that you can tell which kind it is? Tell me in the chat box. Let's check your understanding. How can you tell? What should you look out for? All right, so now we're going to play a game. What kind is this? Let's look at these examples and tell me what kind it is in the chat box, and then we'll continue and I'll give you the answers. Okay, so here's this one. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw again the blinding flash of green light more clearly than he had ever remembered it before. And he remembered something else. For the first time in his life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. So what kind do you think this is? All right. So if you said third person, yay. Now, it's hard to say whether or not this is limited or omniscient. We can definitely see Harry's thoughts. We kind of see a little bit of Hagrid, but, I'm not sure that's enough to say omniscient. So third person, if you put that, yay. It might be limited, it might be omniscient. This excerpt's a little too small maybe, but it's at least third. We know that because all the he stuff. Let's go to the next one. So this is from The Fault in Our Stars. Once we got around the circle, Patrick always asked if anyone wanted to share, and then began the circle jerk of support. Everyone talking about fighting and battling and winning and shrinking, and scanning. To be fair to Patrick, he let us talk about dying too, but most of them weren't dying. Most would live into adulthood as Patrick had. What kind is it? All right, hopefully you put first because of all the we stuff, right? This is first person for sure, where the character is the narrator. There's a character, probably the protagonist, right? And this is from chapter 1. If you've read it, you know. Okay, here we go. How about this one? Okay, this is from Jane Austen. How about this one? Pride and Prejudice, by the way. So here we go. Elizabeth, having rather expected to affront him, was amazed at his gallantry, but there was a mixture of sweetness and an archness to her in her manner which made it difficult for her to affront anybody. And Darcy had never been so bewitched by any woman as he was by her. He really believed that were it not for the inferiority of her connections, he should be in some danger, in danger of falling in love. So what's this one? And how can you tell? What's this one? All right, hopefully you said this is omniscient, third person omniscient. And how do we know? Because I don't see any I or me here, and we're able to get in both Elizabeth's heart and mind and Darcy's heart and mind. So this is third person omniscient for sure. How about this one? This is from N.K. Jemisin from her piece, The Fifth Season. You are she is you. You are Essen. Remember the woman whose son is dead. Which one is this and how do you know? Hopefully you said second person because of the you stuff, right? So that's second person. Maybe not the whole book or stories in this, but this part is definitely second person. All right, what about this one? This is from, I always mess this title up. It's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, I believe. Or it's Dr. Strange and Mr. Norrell. I'm trying to remember. One of the two. Anyway, big old fatty book. It's great. It's a lot of fun, but here's a chunk from it. Mr. Segundus had not told Mrs. Pleasance that Mr. Norrell was old, and yet she fancied that he must be. From what Mr. Segundus had told her, she thought of him as a sort of miser who hoarded magic instead of gold. And as our narrative progress, I will allow the reader to judge the justice of this portrait of Mr. Norrell's character. What is it? All right, hopefully you could tell it's first person because of the I will allow the reader to judge. It's fine. Sometimes the characters, the narrator is a character that also knows they're writing a book and that the reader is reading. This is a classic thing that a lot of Victorian novelists would do. that breaking of the fourth wall, but it's first person. Okay, let's do it. Right. All right, this is the beginning of Moby Dick. Tell me what this one is. Call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world. What point of view is this? How do you know? All right, hopefully you could tell this is first person again, right? He says, call me Ishmael, right? So Ishmael's telling us the story, but he's not like kind of the person that you focus on in the story is not he. It's the captain of the ship. All right, moving on. So for your homework for the characterization and point of view, again, I want you to look at paper menagerie again. Look for elements of characterization and point of view, and looking for meaning of the author's choices that you notice, and add 3 more ARNs. So we should be at, you know, one, the ones we did together, right? So depending on how many we got done in class, plus 3 more. So at least 4, if not 5 ARNs now on our story. Make sure you don't all do it all on the first page. You want to see growth of a character. Okay, so make sure you're getting spread out throughout the story. But remember, no more than one point of view. ARN, focus more on characterization. All right, that's it. You survived. Can't wait to see what you see.